discovered they were all balmy. But back in those days, they had something called the sex offenders course that you had to do, which I wouldn't do because I was innocent of the charges I'd been found guilty in a court of law wrongfully. As a result, I ended up in the prison there and had a great time in all 3 prisons I went to, cheering people up, learning about their problems. I managed to get 12 fellow inmates over the 3.5 years, released on appeal during my time there, which was great satisfying. They gave me their debts, the documents that you have. I looked through it. I spotted things that many lawyers are useless, hadn't spotted, mentioned them, they referred it back, and they got released on appeal. Well, that was only a dozen people in three prisons in 3.5 years, but still very, very satisfying. So I had a great time in prison, and I would say to anybody who's got somebody in prison or who has to relate to people who are in prison, they can enjoy themselves too. The secret is, stop thinking about yourself, which you have to do a lot of the time, and you're locked up in your cell for 18 hours a day, and you're obviously going to spend a lot of time thinking about what happened to you and why it was all wrong or right or whatever, fair or unfair. But there's still loads and loads of time to think of other people, to help them, to listen to their problems, often which are not legal problems. People have problems in their private lives. I mean, one of the things I was horrified to notice that about 50% of the people in all the prisons I went to could not read or write. Now, how the hell can you go through a court sequence without being able to read or write? Answer, you rely on your lawyers, big mistake. Or you rely on the police, big mistake. So I was able to read people letters from their wives that caused them suffering greatly to floods of tears, which was quite distressing, but also very rewarding. And even more, write letters on their behalf, which I always said, by the way, this is written by my friend Jonathan King, but these are my feelings. They would then tell me their feelings, their genuine feelings about their wives or their children or their parents or whatever, and I would put into their words what they were trying to say and write it down. The result was chaos. Every time I went into a visit room, loads of people would rush up to me, throw their arms around me and say, "Thank you so much for what you did for Fred or John," or whoever it was. This included, by the way, quite a few teenage boys, which made me slightly disturbed. I'm saying, this is not a good idea, you know what I'm in here for? But the prison officers, most of whom became good friends as well, went, "Oh God, we know you're innocent, Jonathan, we know it's all bollocks. We don't have any problems with that." Anyway, that's the secret. If you've got people who are in prison and who are really depressed and unhappy, tell them to start thinking about other people, and they will find it's incredibly boosting. They get more fun, more humour, more interest, more activity, friendships develop. I met some really nice people in prison, some of whom were terrorists or serial killers, but who had good sides to them. I learned 2 things in prison: tolerance and patience. And both of those things, which I had none of before I went in, and by the way, I have none of anymore now, but I learned them both in prison, and I had such a great time. I really enjoyed my 3.5 years inside. People can't understand that because I wasn't making a fortune. I've been offered a job at $5 million a year as chairman of EMI Records globally before all this happened to me, and perhaps was one of the reasons why it happened to me. But who gives a shit? I don't need $5 million a year. I mean, look at the way I dress. £5 a year is about enough. The other thing is, this is empowering the innocent. And I have to tell you, I am not innocent. You could hear a pin drop. I don't even like the idea of being innocent. Innocent people are terribly boring. You've got to be guilty of something. And I was very much guilty of something. I decided I was bisexual from an early age. I also discovered I was hugely attractive. Well, it's very nice. That means that anybody I fancied of either gender who was, and of course it's great being bisexual. You only have to go for the most beautiful, attractive, nice, wonderful human beings, both male and female. You don't need to be specialist in one area. So I then found out when I was about 15 or 16, to my horror, watching a film called Victim, starring the mighty Dirk Bogarde, that if you were homosexual or had any kind of homosexual indications in your sexuality, you could end up in prison or even dead. You know, because quite a lot of people, don't forget this was in the early 60s, would kill themselves if they were exposed. Blackmail was enormous. We'll get on to blackmail again in a moment. And I was horrified by this. And I looked into it and I thought, well, this is mad. If I fall in love with a girl of 16 and I'm 16, it's perfectly legal, right? If I want to just have sex with a girl of 16 and I'm 16, perfectly legal, that's fine. However, not with somebody of the same gender, ever. Doesn't matter what age they are, ever. So from that point onwards, I started breaking the law deliberately and continued in, I think, 67 when they made it legal for males to have sex with males, as long as both were over 21. I wasn't even over 21 at that point, and I'm going, but this is mad. Why are men not able to make up their minds until they're 21, whereas women can make up their minds at 16? I mean, that's insulting to both genders, in my opinion. So I deliberately broke the law for all of my adult sex life. Thoroughly enjoyed myself, so by the way did everybody I had sex with, I'm pleased to say. Otherwise I wouldn't have done it. And I then fairly rapidly discovered that actually I wasn't breaking the law because nobody made a complaint about me within a year, and there is a clause in the, whatever it was in 67 that said if you were both over the age of 16, I think, and didn't make a complaint within a year, then it was no longer considered a prosecutable crime. These are the things you find out when you go through the process that I've been through. Huge advantage. But I just thought I should make that clear. You know, empowering the innocent. I'm not innocent, but I'm quite bright, and I've spotted quite a few things. So let me just basically fill you in on those things. Times have changed, and what we've got to be aware of is that this all happened to me 23 years ago, originally. Since that period, the Surrey police, dreadful force, much worse than the Met, but we won't go into that now. Surrey police tried 2 or 3 more times. All of those failed. I was either acquitted, found not guilty, trials were stopped, thrown out, retrials banned. In fact, I think if you work it out of the people who made the false allegations, the ones I was found guilty of were 5 back in 2001. The ones I was found not guilty of, or thrown out or whatever, was 45. So he got 5 to 45. Innocent in 45, guilty in 5. Bizarre. But times have changed since then, and the trouble these days is, especially with the media that likes inflating everything, everything gets inflated and built up. So people who might have made a mistake, and this is quite often the case, or been drunk or drugged or whatever, partied too much, misunderstood intentions, had sex but didn't, they call it regret sex, I think. All these various things that basically when I was younger were just sort of normal mistakes you make when you're growing through relationships. Suddenly get inflated, encouraged by others to be called rape because there's compensation. I mean, the whole compensation thing is just absurd. The amount of money people can make, and those are people who you are found innocent, and yet the CICA, I think called them, pays them large amounts of money. One of the people who I was found innocent of was paid £17,000 of the public purse for being not assaulted. I mean, talk about mad. Anyway, times have changed, and we are now in that situation where, as Saul just said, the police are told, the law, thanks to Keir Starmer actually, when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, you will be believed even if you are lying. I don't think that's actually what the police are told, but they're told you will be believed, and I think the even if you are lying bit has to be accepted, because that is what you are told. If you're told you will be believed, if you're lying or not, you will still be believed. Is that mad? It's sheer insanity. And how the police, I know a lot of police officers who absolutely hate this situation and go, this is insane. How can we interview somebody who may well be lying? And yet we know they're lying, and we've got to pretend we believe everything they say. This is something that has to change. The police who are suffering now from the same kind of thing that happened with all of us earlier on. As you know, now the police are being investigated. Alcohol, vodka. The police now are being looked at, but again the same things happen, because it's as though the public can't take anything unless it's really simplistic. So the police are now being investigated basically for sexual offences, right? So they're now finding almost every police officer guilty of rape or attempted rape or buggery, or I think somebody yesterday is being done for exposing himself on Hampstead Heath. I thought it was obligatory for people to expose themselves. I mean, isn't that why Hampstead Heath is there, for God's sake? So it's crazy, and it happened in America. Do you remember when I wrote a book called Not a Knee on the Neck? And you remember when the police officer killed a man by kneeling on his neck? It was all filmed, fortunately, by passers-by who got it on film. Dreadful, appalling. What should have happened is people should have said police brutality. The way some police, and I do believe it's a very tiny amount of police, behave is disgraceful. They must stop doing this sort of thing. Was completely turned on its head into Black Lives Matter. It's like Me Too. Let me rephrase that. Hashtag Me Too. You know, completely out of control. And tiny, yes, of course there are people who abuse their position, take advantage and all this sort of thing. But the actual reality is, it isn't that widespread umbrella catch-all. It's the way human beings have been adapting and changing, and human beings as a species need to be taught not to take advantage of people, not to be violent to people. It's a much bigger problem that we keep narrowing it down. So what we're seeing now is loads and loads of probably quite decent cops being done for some stupid thing like exposing themselves on Hampstead Heath, where they might be actually excellent police officers, but doing their job doesn't matter. It's going on everywhere. Dominic Raab, who I have really no time for. I stand about 100% against almost every one of his policies personally. But the fact of the matter is, what's happened with him is absurd. It's a media-created situation again, where a tiny bit of bullying, and I think ministers should bully civil servants, and I think civil servants should bully the people underneath them and say, for God's sakes, you're not doing this job properly, do it properly, or something's going to go terribly wrong. And yet, for a tiny little level of that, we now see the media kicks in, the guy resigns. I mean, I don't care if he resigns or not, but that is just expresses the way this whole thing has gone balmy. And that's the main point I want to make, is that you'll notice a lot of these police that have been done, and ones that have quite rightly been done. Wayne Couzens, I think, was one. David Leggett, or something. Often they used the law to break the law. They flashed their warrant cards or whatever. Now, this is something which has completely taken over a lot of the things in the world at the moment. And I want to point you now, just move away from the police a moment. We've sort of succeeded in that people are now looking at the police. We failed dismally and they're only looking at a certain tiny area. I have to say, I find police, and I bumped into a few, who actually use the law to break the law, and who actually abuse their position, twist round evidence, get people to say things that aren't true, believe people, inverted commas, who they know are telling lies, and so on and so forth. It's shocking, much worse than somebody exposing themselves on Hampstead Heath, but that's my own personal opinion. Let's move away from them a moment to the lawyers. Now, there's a group of lawyers that are using the law to break the law. Ambulance chasers. In the good old days, it used to be things like whiplash, and an expensive car gets bumped into by a little battered old 1943 Mini, and they claimed thousands and all of that. That was what used to go on a great deal, the ambulance chasers. It is now happening enormously, and I can say from personal opinion here, in the legal world. There are several firms who specialise in this kind of ambulance chasing. I know Slater and Gordon were famous for it some years ago. I don't know if they still are. Simpson Miller up north are very well known for this kind of area because they took in some years ago a lawyer called Peter Garsden. We'll return to him in a moment. But this ambulance chasing game is a very clever one. It involves usually people who have been accused of something and are dead, or people who have been accused of something and are then basically convicted. And the victims, in inverted commas, then think, oh, well, this is quite nice. I've got from the CICA, in one case, as I said, we've been minusing £17,000. But wouldn't it be rather